Welcome to day 2 of your Old Testament Bible reading plan. Thanks for taking this journey with us. 2 years we will spend reading through the Old Testament, and every Tuesday we will be reading the Torah, and so I'm calling Tuesdays Torah Tuesdays. But I want to start by addressing a question that I'm sure you've asked yourself. 2 years is a very, very long time to spend reading through one part of the Bible. So why are we spending 2 years reading through just the Old Testament? Now, on the one hand, I think that's a really valid question. On the other hand, I think that demonstrates a bit of where our culture is at. The Old Testament is 3/4 of the Bible that sits in front of you. So if we spent 6 months reading through the New Testament, we should spend 18 months reading through the Old Testament. So why are we doing it in 2 years? Well, we wanted to slow down even more because we wanted to not cover 3 or 4 chapters a day, but we actually wanted to cover 1 or 2 or 3 chapters a day. We wanted to slow down and take care in how we went through the Old Testament because there are some amazing stories and insights into who God is and how we are to follow him if we slow down on the Old Testament, particularly on the Pentateuch. There are some amazing insights if we slow down. I think the other thing to keep in mind is some of the most confusing and troubling parts of the Bible are also in the Pentateuch, in the first 5 books. So think about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, or the stories of incest that happen in the Genesis narrative, or maybe some of the prohibition laws in the law, like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, things about homosexuality and slavery and stoning people and eye for an eye, that kind of stuff. That's really tricky, and our culture often points to that stuff and says, how can you say that your God is good when all of these things happen in the Bible? I think that's the sort of thing that we want to slow down and look at carefully and look at it closely and consider it. And so that's the purpose of these videos. So every day we'll read a chapter or 2 or maybe 3 chapters from the Pentateuch, and there'll be an accompanying devotional on Tuesdays from me, looking at the Torah, thinking about what it means. And over the course of 93 weeks, that's how long our reading plan is, we will read 187 chapters of the Pentateuch, and I'm really excited to do that. So let's start. What are the first 5 books of the Bible? What is the Pentateuch? Well, the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. In the Hebrew Bible, these books are called the Torah, and Torah means law. So it is called the law, and you might expect it to be a written code of what you should and should not do. But there are stories in there as well. In fact, most of the Torah is a story. So it's called the Torah, which means law. It's called the Pentateuch. Pentateuch just means 5 scrolls. Pentateuch, 5 scrolls. And sometimes it's called the books of Moses, not necessarily because he wrote them all. In fact, there's a part of the Torah that records Moses' death and burial, so he didn't write that. But because these books are associated with Moses. 4 of the books in the Pentateuch focus around Moses and the story of Moses. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are all about Moses. So that's the name, that's what these books are. The overview of the story is that it begins at the very, very beginning. Genesis means beginning. And so the story begins with 11 chapters focusing on what's called the primeval era, recording some stories of early human history. This is where you have the garden, you have Cain and Abel, you have the flood, you have the Tower of Babel, these sorts of things. And then after that, the story zooms in on a man named Abram and on his family, because this is the family that God focuses in on to be a blessing to and to see them bless the world. So we focus in on Abraham and his family, and the rest of the Pentateuch is about the family of Abraham. And so he has a son Isaac, who has a son, Jacob, who has 12 sons, and those 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. And the 12 tribes of Israel are the story for the rest of the Pentateuch, how they are taken to Egypt because of famine, how they are enslaved in Egypt for 430 years, how they are redeemed from slavery by Moses and God through the plagues, how they are brought out of slavery, and how they are disobedient to God in the wilderness. They spend 40 years in the wilderness, and then that brings us to the edge of the promised land, Deuteronomy, where the Pentateuch ends with Moses calling his people to faithfulness as they enter into the promised land. So that's an overview of the story of the Pentateuch. Now I just wanted to finish by giving you 2 tips that I've found really, really helpful for getting a deep and profound understanding of what the Pentateuch says. The first one is that you have to let these stories they have to sit with you. There's a reason that Psalm 1 says that we should meditate on the Torah of the Lord, and we should dwell on it day and night. Because when you think about these stories, when we delve into them deeply, you see that actually they speak to each other. The stories interpret each other. And when you start to see that, and I'm hopefully going to point some of this out to you, you start to open your eyes to what's really going on in this broader narrative, and how God is turning this chaotic world that we have created through sin. He is taking it and he is using it for his good purposes. And it's just the most incredible thing. So that's my first tip, is let the stories speak to each other. Remember the stories that you've read as you read the next stories, which is why we're another good reason to take our time with the Pentateuch. And the second tip that I would give you is that you should find Jesus in the story. Find Jesus in the Pentateuch. This is what Jesus says. Once he's resurrected from the dead, he speaks to some of his disciples in Luke 24, and he says, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." So Jesus is saying that the law of Moses is written about Jesus. These things that are written there, they are written about Jesus. And we want to find the way that Jesus is the fulfillment of this law. The legitimate ways that he is the fulfillment of it, not the illegitimate ways. So we're not looking for Jesus under rocks. We're not looking for Jesus in hidden words or secret numbers or anything like that. We're looking for the way that Jesus is in the story, as the authors intended us to find Jesus as the Messiah, the serpent crusher who would redeem the world and bring blessing to the world. So there you go. There are 2 tips. Let the stories speak to each other and look for Jesus in the stories. All the best.